Fair if y'all want to go a bit further. A little bit up to y'all.
All right, I'll turn it over to y'all. Thank y'all.
Off here? Sure. Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay. My name is Jamie Provoznak. I'm your finance officer, and tonight we are very pleased to present you with a draft of your operating budget for FY24. And let me get the deck going. There we go. Right. Tonight's agenda. So we're going to open with, Alex is going to have some opening remarks for you. And then we'll talk at a very corporate enterprise-wide level about your FY24 operating budget. It includes your capital budget as well and the capital outlay lines. So we're talking about those two items in connection with each other. We've got revenue forecasts for you, particularly around your big three. The property tax, the sales and use, and the franchise. Talk a little bit about reserves in both the general fund and the stormwater fund. And then our internal process, like how we got to where we are tonight. And then we'll close with next steps and questions. So without further ado, let's look at your budget calendar. You should have that document in front of you, hopefully. Tonight's our kickoff. And after you hear on the corporate level, you'll get a series of department director meetings where you can really dig down into the details and see what's driving their costs and what assumptions our department directors have within their industry. June 12th is your budget public hearing, and then you could adopt that night, or you could adopt, I think there's another date in there later in June where you could adopt as well. But as you know, per statute, Budget Fiscal Control Act, you must have your budget adopted before July 1. As you guys know, you're not new to this. So I will then turn to Alex, and he'll open us up with his remarks.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it. All right. So good news, something y'all already know. The town is in great financial condition, right? It's because of the stewardship, this council, previous councils, great decisions have been made, as well as our location here in the Charlotte region. We're just right in the middle of, an area that's just really the economic powerhouse in some ways for this region. There are many, many towns and local governments that would, in a second, trade places with us. So that's the good news. But, and there's a but, right? As you all know, we've talked about it, we face some significant budgetary challenges moving forward. As a reminder, as we've talked about it, the 5-year financial forecast, we saw Union County's potential sewer capacity shortage issue that could hinder tax-based growth and thus future revenues. Our trends are showing expenditures exceeding revenues, and it's showing we won't have new revenues to enhance services or for operational needs as well. We can fill the gap with ARPA and reserve funds to supplant those differences, but those funds, that's more of a short-term strategy, right? The ARPA funds are a one-time deal. Our reserves are like our savings account, right? You can't spend that forever. So what we saw in the report is once that happens, the town would need to increase taxes for the town to maintain healthy fund balances, continue to provide current service levels, or continue to enhance services and achieve the long-term goals of the town. So we talked about it during the annual retreat. We talked about all the financial pressures that the town is facing, and certainly it feels like, especially felt like during the budget development as we worked on this internally to get at a point to bring to y'all that a lot of those financial pressures are converging right now when it comes to this budget. So what do revenues look like? Big picture. So our reoccurring revenue projections for the next fiscal year aren't keeping pace with inflation. They're about 3.5, 3.6%. I think overall inflation is about 6.5% as a whole through December. And when I say reoccurring revenues, that's the number I like to look at, because in local government, a lot of times you get various grants, one-time revenue sources, a lot of pass-through things that happen in local government, and it can really muddy the water when you're looking at revenues. So I do like to look at the revenues that are reoccurring, the big picture ones: ad valorem, sales tax, franchise utility tax. Also, potential sewer capacity limitations mean that we're more conservative in the revenue estimates that we do make, right? Growth is one of the economic engines of our area, especially because of our residential to commercial tax base ratio. As we know, we went through the economic development strategic planning process. We have a residential commercial tax base ratio that's 84% residential, 16% commercial. From just a tax base standpoint, from a purely numbers standpoint, the ideal ratio is somewhere around 60% residential, 40% commercial. And we know that, right? We set a goal to try to get that commercial number up. But if the sewer capacity issue does stifle those efforts, it does make it more challenging, and as a result, our revenue projections are more conservative. Expenditures, big picture. So not a surprise, not a shocker. Just like when we go to the store, we see the price of eggs have gone up, the price of bread, everything's gone up. They range from the high-profile issues, the things that we've talked about with the board, the trash contract, getting that renewed, police vehicle costs going up, to the more low-profile, the mundane things that we haven't talked about, office supplies, and really everything in between. We can talk to Mr. Parker. He can tell us about asphalt prices going up. We can talk to Ms. Provoznak. She can tell us about auditing costs going up. Just everything's going up. Labor costs are also going up. Again, that's not a shocker. We've talked about it before. It's not unique to local government. We've seen with police firsthand how not keeping pace with the market can make attracting and retaining officers more challenging and affect service levels. And then finally, service levels have been enhanced in recent years, or we plan on enhancing them. We talked last year, we saw projections about how with road maintenance, our roads were deteriorating at a rate quicker than we could fund the remediation of them. And so the board saw that, was rightfully concerned, and said, hey, we want to set a goal of having about $1.2 million each year for road resurfacing funding. And at the time, they said, okay, we'll use reserves for the current fiscal year that we're in, and then we'll talk about how to fund that kind of moving forward in the future. So put a pin in that. We'll need to come back and have a conversation on that one. Also, we've enhanced various parks and greenways. We've enhanced our roadside mowing, and we've gotten the budget to handle the maintenance for the bypass beautification that's coming up. It's going to make that area around the hospital look really, really good. And then finally, adding a full-time SRO officer at the elementary school, but thankfully that is at least partially grant funded. All right, general fund, what are we seeing? Well, what we tried to do with the draft budget was really go after those council priorities and largely keep service levels at the same point, and not raise the tax raises. To give you, what does it look like if we're at the starting point default financially from a revenue standpoint? We couldn't do everything, but we could do a big chunk. How did we do that? Alex, if you're telling me revenues are relatively flat or effectively even declining, if they're below inflation, but you're telling me expenditures are going up, how do we do that? It's really a bunch of short-term approaches and measures. The first was using equivalent ARPA funds to fund the various capital, one-off, and carryover expenditures. So if something was budgeted for this current year and it's a project that's not going to be completed, but it's in the middle of the project, we would carry that over and use reserves. Same thing with one-off expenditures, big capital expenditures. We would use kind of those equivalent ARPA funds. And Jamie and Aaron would yell at me if I didn't point this out. When we're talking about equivalent ARPA funds, we're not talking about ARPA funds. We're talking about funds that ARPA funds free up. And it's kind of complicated. It's a technicality. But basically, the ARPA funds are going for the police salaries. Next, we've delayed several capital expenditures, try to kind of push out where we can into the future. We weren't able to add the additional road funding without a tax increase of reserves. That's the $800,000 number that we need. We'll have to talk about to get that road maintenance up to the threshold that the board set. And again, these are short-term measures. They're things that can't last forever, but it is an option to kind of go down that path if the board wants. So what's the bottom line? You know, we had number forecasts from our 5-year financial forecast. The numbers obviously aren't exactly on, but the philosophy probably remains true. Moving forward, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this year, but moving forward in the coming years, the board will be faced with a decision of whether to raise taxes or reduce those core public services. Now, when I talk about reducing core public services, we're probably not talking about, hey, we'll just eliminate an event or two in the park. We're probably talking about some really bread and butter core services. Think, you know, and I'm not suggesting we do these, please don't allow me to miscommunicate this, but decreasing the frequency of trash pickup, reducing the amount of officers on a shift, reducing sidewalk repairs, really kind of high visibility things, the bread and butter of this budget. We've really tried to slash the budget a lot. I want to have this budget to have the body fat percentage of a bodybuilder, just lean and mean, but still having to accomplish the things that we want it to do. And so, again, you don't have to decide between those two things this year. You can decide to push that decision into the future and use those ARPA funds and our reserves to plug the gap. But in several years, those ARPA funds will be exhausted and the reserve levels will get to a point where they're perhaps dipping below a healthy level of what we would want our reserves to be. And the council will be faced with that same decision, just with fewer reserves. Now, this is assuming all the projections go out, you never know, but we have seen a pretty solid trend. Stormwater. So during last year's budget process, the council looked at the budget, all the projects we were facing, and expressed concern that the stormwater revenues were inadequate to meet needs and also inequitable. What I mean by that is a residential home with 1,000 square feet would pay the same amount in stormwater fees as a residential home that has 100,000 square feet. I'm not aware of any house that size in Stallings, but you get my point. And so is there a way to kind of balance that equity? Because the larger homes are going to have more stormwater runoff and thus going to have a greater impact from the system. So the idea is that the properties having the greatest impact on the stormwater system and thus causing the greatest need to spend money would pay the most in. So we have completed the analysis, and increasing stormwater fees is needed to meet our stormwater needs moving forward. We'll get into the details of that as we get into the budget, but we're likely looking at increasing our annual stormwater fees per a residential property about $40 annually. Commercial would be about $67 annually per ERU. What does that mean? We'll get into the details and talk about it. I just want to get y'all focused on this is kind of the big picture of where things are shaping up. And then finally, it includes funds to cover the increased costs of funding these high priority, i.e. the safety projects. You've heard from Mr. Parker several times about how our costs are going up, the number of projects are going up. We want to evaluate those impervious surface levels to try to get a more equitable system. And finally, we're proposing to begin the transition to doing more repair work in-house when it comes to stormwater repairs to reduce costs long-term. There's a reason most places don't just contract out all their stormwater repairs. They have some level of in-house capacity to do it because we believe that the cost will be less long-term. It'll take some time to build out that capacity, but we're proposing adding some equipment this first year to start down that path. And I think that's all I've got from a big picture perspective. Happy to answer any questions or concerns. But I think Jamie's going to do a great job really getting into the details and probably answering a lot of the questions you might have. Sure. Yeah. That, that's a that's a great, yeah. That's a great segue, I think, into Jamie's. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm? Hmm? Yeah. That's right. And tonight, Jamie will walk through and show you big picture. These are our total expenditures.
Yeah, that's kind of
So,
what I'm looking for, kind of just,
yeah.
before we go into this too far, I just like to know.
Yeah, I think you're looking at about 8.6 million. And then we plug the gap with about $1.4 million using ARPA funds. And then from there, that'll give us, I believe, 10.1. Is that the number of the total expenditures? Sure. Yeah.
For a while.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when we started?
Yeah.
We've had a healthy balance for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So while then we did.
Yeah. Th- Yeah, that's a great question, a great point. I think it seems that way because we do, right, Kevin?
Sure, yeah. I think.
Yeah, come on up.
Speaking to the council meeting last Tuesday, kind of gave a general update on our program since the previous update I provided back in February. Excuse me, and noted that, and this is just one example, but it was the most recent example was we did a project over in Fairfield Plantation recently that was originally quoted at $10,000. We dug down, sinkhole repair, typical sinkhole, our typical issues that we see. Dug down and realized that an entire 180-foot stretch of pipe needed to be replaced because it was a metal pipe and the bottom was completely corroded out and rusted out. And so we're running into that quite a bit where what's on the surface doesn't translate down to the overall issue, and it's just better to, when you're excavated, exposing everything, to fix everything on the spot there than it is to kind of kick the can down the road, given.
I understand, you know, everything's going up. We understand that. Off the pipe. Projects.
You know, I really can't speak to the timing of all these projects coming in. I noted as well that these are higher priority projects too. These are sinkhole repairs. These are threats to property damage, severe flooding that's encroaching onto people's houses and their property pretty significantly. You raise a good point, and I don't know if I have a direct answer to that when it comes to the timing of the.
A lot of these things have about our bill, you had about 20 years old. So I think had a big boom about 20 years ago.
I'll make sure that, when we
Great, I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah.
Questions before me, for me?
Right. So we're gonna keep a corporate-wide perspective, right? And take a first glance at your general fund. And you might wanna dig in. If you go to page 6 in your document in front of you, you'll really get a good feel for, where the money's going. But here's big picture. 10.1, that is, based off of your current tax rate. And as you know, your current tax rate is 0.186. So it's also driven by what that assessed value is, and we get that from Union County. So 1 penny on your current tax rate is gonna give you about $244,000. Now, when we're looking at revenues, new revenue, so set your reserves aside for the moment, and just new revenues, about 8 million. And that's pretty, it's relatively flat. And we'll dig a little bit deeper. So, big question. Where does all the money go? Well, it's going to your policing services. So if you see on this pie chart, 35.3% towards policing, and that makes sense, right? The police department has the most employees, they have the rolling stock, they have a heavy lifting of the operating expenses. But noting Kevin's piece, and if we put back in $800,000 worth of street maintenance, sidewalk repairs, you see the percent distribution is shifting as streets and highways go back up 13%. So that's a general overview of where your money is going in the general fund. Here's that page 6. So the bottom line is your 10.1. When we're looking at what you adopted 10.9 last year. That's an $800,000 decrease. And that is in a large portion because we're not funding those streets and highways projects. And then you have a lot of one-offs. You have, and Alex can help me here with your patient contribution. I think you have Atrium. You had a big cut of money come in from Atrium. So, and to your question about the projection, that's right in the middle of where we think we'll be. Now, Powellville, you see that's very low at the moment, and Kevin is proposing projects where he's really going to Powellville money in the last quarter. I'll let you take that in. Oop. Go ahead, sir. that includes your new revenue of 8 million and 1.4 million fund balance appropriation, your ARPA and reserves, to get you balanced.
Yeah, the 1.4 is all ARPA.
No, so the way that it's working is your ARPA is going towards, replacing the police department salaries and wages. That frees up more money for you to do. That make
Yeah,
sense?
so the 1.4 is the balance of budget, you keep 1.4.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, sir. And so, you have to, adopt a balanced budget. So where we are was 10 million in expenses, we have 8 million in new revenue, we gotta close the gap. And so I believe it's on page 5 of your document, where you will see, what Alex has proposed to those one-times, capital costs to close the gap.
And I do want to clarify.
Hopefully that's still on page 5.
When you look at that list, what the ARPA funds are going towards.
Thank you,
This
Alex.
is what we would need to
Mm-hmm.
budget for the fund. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It says Stallings' 10th anniversary. We can cut that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good eye. Thank you for that.
Well, getting back to page 6, I know we're gonna get into it later on.
Yes, sir.
You know, two concerns I have. Public Works, last year's, two-year projections will be 245. Park and Rec,
Yes, and I can also defer to my colleagues here, but for your public works, Kevin has been reorganizing his department, and so that's utilities that he's moved.
A good significant.
A big
and we can get into details.
He'll be able, everybody when they go, no, and we can answer it tonight as well, Mayor, but everybody when they go will be able to get into the nuts and bolts of what's driving their bottom line, their costs. But from an enterprise corporate perspective, you're at a 7.7 decrease, but also note, look at what happened when you adopted the budget at 10.9. You made a variety of reserves, appropriations, unrestricted reserve. For FY23, you're really at 12.4. So just to kind of mull over that, that's your amended budget right now, is 12.4.
After taking 1.4,
Oh, in reserves?
yes, ma'am.
It'll be around 5 million, yeah. Unrestricted fund balance, yeah. You're welcome. I've got a reserve slide too that you can mull over. But let's talk about revenue, okay? So, new revenue coming in, 8.6 million. Close the gap, which is 1.4, and get your balance to 10.1. We're adding in reserves. Now, your major general fund revenues. You know, you have a variety of general fund revenues, but your big three, the ones that really lift up your fund, are your ad valorem, your sales and use, and your franchise and utility. So we're gonna dig a little bit deeper into those three, and you can see where they are and some of the assumptions that were made there. So you're at your property tax. This is your real and personal, as you know. Alex is coming around with some good work in this area that he's done. This is taking a look at collections. I think it's a 10-year. So we want you to take that in for a second. Now, as you know, Union County tax assessor, they collect on our behalf, and so they distribute it. Like that. It's very good for us. So this is the collection rates that you're seeing. did our projection of what this money would be for FY '24. We assumed your current tax rate. You adjust that tax rate, you know, you could bring in more, not suggesting anything there. 98.5% collection rate, which falls right in between the data in front of you, and your assessed value, which we just received from Van over at the county, 2.4. I also, let's not forget too, we have a foot in Mecklenburg County, and as you all know, Mecklenburg County went through a reval recently. So as part of that, we have to calculate the revenue neutral tax rate, which you're aware of. So we calculate it, we must, per statute, publish it, but you don't have to adopt it. So you're gonna see that calculation at one of our upcoming meetings. Union County also charges us a tax collection fee. It's 1.5% of collections. It's modest, and so we've budgeted for that. You'll see that when you dig in your admin and your stormwater budgets. So that money is in there for that for them to collect on our behalf. And here's your trend. So this is year-over-year percent change in the actuals that are coming in for this particular tax, starting in FY '19. So you can see that it's this huge spike, that glaring spike. Well, what is that? Well, that's Union County when they did their reval. So you know that the property tax bills are due in January. So that's why you're seeing, whew, what a huge spike there in collections and actuals. But if you normalize that and you pull that out, it's probably a 2 to 3% increase year over year in the property tax. Sales and use. Tell me if you need more time to marinate. Mm-hmm.
Go up, and it would most likely, right, I mean, you look at this, good as it looks, like, this is as good as it gets when it comes to tax. Eventually, I mean, look at this chart, you're gonna get the money. A lot of really great legal means, liens, and things like that.
Are you suggesting maybe coming back with what that would look like if you changed the collection rate? We can do that, we're happy to do
I think
that.
it's fine, I just want sort of.
Hmm?
Almost 100%.
Yeah, that's what we were waiting on. Oh, you, okay. Sales and use. So there's lots of conversation through the League of Municipalities around the sales and use. So we know that individuals receive their stimulus checks, right, after March of 2020. So people are out there, they're buying, and things are looking pretty good. But as people have been spending their stimulus relief checks, and now here we are, what do we see some of what's going to start to happen? And so the league's throwing up caution flags around this particular tax, and also to pay attention to what the Fed's doing and inflation. And Alex talked a lot about that, and you guys are all aware. and in the know, and then also to look at your local economy and what's happening. So Max and I had a great conversation on this, and when you're talking about future commercial development, the grocery stores, the restaurants, the retail coming here, we want them to come here, we want them to spend here, we don't want them to go elsewhere, right? So paying attention to Union County sewer capacity needs is something that's probably a hot topic that we need to unpack and really pay attention to where that's going. And we're certainly, Max could talk in more detail around what types of future commercial development we're seeing, but we certainly don't want that particular issue to deter developers from coming here to build, right? So, oh, and what's the number? 1.7. Consumer price index, 6.5%. But this, and I don't want Max and I giggle about this, but let's unpack this a little bit. So you have these big, huge, this is your year-over-year percent change in what's coming for sales and use. Ooh, huge spikes, right? Stimulus money, relief checks, people are out there spending. This is good. And then your red line here is normalizing. It's about 3.5%. That dotted line is the trend. Now that trend, if you pull out those outliers, 21 and 22, that trend would probably normalize a little bit more. But so we're looking at maybe 2 to 3% sales and use. And as you know, we share the sales and use with the jurisdictions in Union, right? So who's getting the biggest cut? Well, Monroe, Waxhaw, this is a state tax that's distributed to us. And so we get of the total cut about 1.6% of all sales and use for the month. And it's 2 months in arrears, so when we collect in April, it's really February. So we're looking at that request about 1.7. Yes, sir. Yes. One. Population and assessed value. And that's a great question.
Follow-up, because I
Yeah.
read your description of that line.
Okay.
Yeah, so just
Yeah, absolutely. Brad. Mm-hmm. When was the last reval, sir?
2 years.
2021. Union did it. And Mecklenburg's going this year.
How do we adjust for the Mecklenburg without affecting the rest of the town? How do we make them revenue neutral? Both revenue neutral with those values.
There is a formula for revenue neutral, which we'll bring forward to you. But
Tax rate.
Good question, when it's such a small.
it is, I get less than 1%
Right.
of this from
But if
Mecklenburg.
we don't do anything, those folks are gonna have a 30% tax bump.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of it for the other way when we did ours 2 years ago. But they're gonna have a big old bump. I was just wondering, but it's not.
No,
At
that's
some
an
point,
excellent.
we're gonna migrate.
Does, the issue, I guess, is like when you do the revenue neutral, you look at not just individual properties, the total property, right? And the question I'm asking myself and Jamie and I can look at is, if you're calculating the revenue neutral for just the Mecklenburg side, property valuation change, just the Mecklenburg side. If you
It's
include
just for
everybody,
Mecklenburg.
there's really not that much land. Separate it, that's where it maybe gets interesting. Looking at that.
Mm-hmm, that's an excellent observation. Okay. Franchise and utility, this is your third largest revenue source. We're estimating receipts of about 815,000, very modest. This is your, like Dominion. And also, cable. So, the energy. Electric, energy.
Or Union Power and Duke are the.
Mm-hmm. And so you have power in here. You also have cable. And so as people start moving away from Time Warner Cable, as you know, and into streaming services, we have to, pay attention here. And here is your trend for 5 years. In that data table, those are the actuals that we receive at the close of the fiscal year, and then we were talking about this at the league level. Netflix, Hulu is not captured here, and so that's why we need to be paying attention. Now, I don't know how we could actually figure out how many folks are moving away from cable into streaming services, but correct. I think it's through the sales and use tax that streaming services is being picked up, but I'm not entirely sure. It's just not there.
I'm just trying to understand the utility. Not actually like
Yeah.
not just having the line.
Oh, yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Look at your electrical bill,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be, yeah, bunch of taxes on there, and we get part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is,
Yeah, thank
Did we
you.
not get one for Spectrum?
In there if you're using, yeah,
we get that.
yeah.
So we do get like the internet, which is
It's, yeah.
smaller than we.
A lot of the way they tax these things is kind of, the biggest driver here is electrical sales tax. A lot of times weather dependent, right? Because obviously the weather changes at sometimes electrical usage goes up and down. And also because things are just getting more energy.
Mm-hmm. This is a state, and it comes quarterly to us. And, I believe it's about a month behind, so. Not sure, but I could look more into it. Might be something different, yeah. Okay. So not only, let me put that in here about gas. So taxes, yes, carries the load in your general fund, but you also have fees, and you have some department-specific revenue. And so you're gonna hear a little bit later, from Max about some proposed changes to your fee schedule. And you have to adopt your fee schedule with your budget ordinance. So he's done some great homework in this area, comparing our fees to like cities and such, and your stormwater fees. And Kevin's done great work here as well, and will talk you through his scenarios and some of his cost drivers as well, and what that fee might look like. We do have two new revenue sources. We have a fee that's going to be implemented for fingerprinting. Our chief entered into an interlocal agreement with Pineville and Mint Hill to charge for using our fingerprinting machine, that police department, those two police departments. Very nominal, about 2,000. And then of course our CRTPO grant, which we received, and we were awarded and actually will receive it in December 2023. And then of course upon receipt, we must participate with a local match. Oh, for okay. Other types of revenue. And now stormwater fund, I don't want to dig too deep into this because Kevin's going to give you a lot of information when it's his turn. But our total expenditures, 1.1 in the stormwater fund. Our town engineer will present you with some scenarios for what that fee could look like. And then when the time arrives, we would respectfully ask you that you support those fee increases. Yes, sir.
In the budget on page,
Good point. No, that revenue that you see later in is based on no rate increases. No rate increases. So, and that's later in that, document that you have about the stormwater fund. No rate increases in the
and then
document.
we decided to take
How that works, Kevin? Did you hear that another year before we actually get the new revenue?
I
Or?
don't believe so. I believe if we make that decision before June 1st,
I think that once we work with the tax, with Vanover and Union, of getting it on the bill, we should be able at least to receive it. You know, if in August we're getting July's and, 1 month behind, that, and I think there's some semantics, mechanics to work through to get it on the bill, the new fee. But it wouldn't be years away, sir. Yeah.
To get there though, that's a decision.
Alex.
costly expenses.
Good conversation. Now, this is just looking at your fees. Again, just keep in mind, this is the rate increase moment. This is just new revenue coming in with no rate increase and what's been happening year over year. So, very modestly, you're at about $500,000 in new revenue for this particular fund. You've got 1.1 in expenditures, you've gotta be balanced, so it's gonna be something for you to really, dig your heels in and talk about amongst yourselves, so, but there's your trend line. Now we're switching gears. For your debt, you have very little debt, but I wanna remind you of some of the details here.
Balance ballpark,
As, what, sir?
what is the ballpark balance of the?
Of the debt? You are in year 5 of a 10-year, and I believe, let me get the right. I see where you could be going. Could you pay it off this without any, right.
Not that I'm suggesting, I just want.
Yeah, about, but I can bring it back. I don't unfortunately have it on the slide for you, but we can get it for you. Sure, yes. So you're looking at $57,000 roughly. So this would be page, so you can actually see, no, I'm sorry, it's $5,000 monthly, $57,000 total for the year. And those interest payments have gone down slightly, as you know, because you're in year 5 of 10. You borrowed at a 3.45% interest rate. And typically you pay your principal, which we've proposed for reserves, $291,000 in around February. So it's about $5,000 going down to roughly $4,000 next year, a month in interest. That is what you've been doing, sir, yes. Yep, that is what you've been doing. Okay, now this is a little bit small, so I feel remiss around this. But this is your general fund balance reserves. But when you're looking here and you're looking at unrestricted, when you closed your FY '22 fiscal year, you had 6.5.
It'd be helpful if we passed out a hard copy of this, the system's point.
This will help you. In your, this is the PowerPoint so you could actually see those figures better.
What you have before you is just a line item budget, and that's the PowerPoint.
Yeah. And we can also have this presentation to you as well. Yeah. Okay. Is everyone with us? You are on a slide, this is slide 31, the big deck. Do you see that in your packets? I see you guys are still looking around. This. Yes, fund balance reserves should be the title. Okay, all right.
Fund balance,
20. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. See that it's. It's right above total. FY '22 fiscal year, you were at 6.5 in unrestricted general fund balance. Out the fiscal year, you read these. So as of February, for unrestricted general fund, you're at 6.4. Categories of fund balance, right? And restricted is exactly what it is. Powell bill, you can only spend it on your streets, you know, your sidewalk repairs, etc. Same with drug forfeiture money, very restricted use, only can go to policing. And then you have more flexibility with how you want to use your committed. That's where you are in terms of your reserves. Of course, now your ARPA money, and that's what we were awarded, 5.1, we've actually received. So on a quarterly basis, you can project budget ordinance to move that money in and salaries with that. So net position, this is your reserves for stormwater. And I'm just touching on this, you can dig deeper with Kevin when the time arrives. But you see that as your close of your fiscal year, and this is all in your audit too, it was 1.2. When you adopted your FY '23 budget, you appropriated 290,000. And so you haven't spent in this fund. You haven't had to go into your reserves throughout this fiscal year for stormwater. So you're at 1 million. Good news is we put this money in a new account, and so we're building some interest in this area. So that number is going up. I had that number, but I didn't want to add to confusion. Now, or create confusion. The net investment in capital assets. Kevin and I talked about this, and so did Alex. That's sort of locked in your infrastructure. Is that right, Kevin? So you're really, where you have your flexibility is that 1 million in unrestricted.
734,000, that's like pipes in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
And the
can't
value
shut
of.
that. So,
Mm-hmm.
Just a governmental accounting thing, the way we display things in this kind of fund, because it's an enterprise fund, is different, and you just show your capital assets. So really the number to look at is that 1 million.
Alex.
See the balance.
No, that was, and I actually have to add in your quarter two. That was your quarter one, 455 police salaries. You made your amendment to that project ordinance. The number is the interest that you're earning on the 5 million.
We have unrestricted ARPA.
Right, sir.
We have
Good
6.4 and 4.
4 point, yes, but I have to add back in, and this is my bad completely. Quarter two, you made that, you did another transfer of about $600,000. So that number, that 4 million. But yes, it is unrestricted. But to go back to Alex's point is, you know, if I may, you know, it's money that we have to use in a certain time frame. So I don't want you to completely hang your hat that you have, you know, this large amount in reserves, and and then you start getting into projects and
Finish
funds generally are not restricted the way power bill and drug forfeiture are. You can use them. For a variety of things. We happen to have selected salary replacement. And so in that vein, it is restricted, where that 455, 424, we went through the payroll register, every police officer, what it costs this, we transferred it in, we replaced those salaries. So in that vein, it's restricted, even though it doesn't have the same sort of tentacles, I guess, as power bill and drug forfeiture. Am I dying over here, Aaron? So, power bill, you need to spend it on street maintenance. You can't get around that.
What I'm trying, I think Stephen and I are on the same page.
Okay,
Let me just say, already done, already are going to go through. That number is
Continue to
Yeah.
decline
well,
quarter by quarter
I
as
mean-
we pay police.
Exactly, but that line represents have to use it on salaries because that is our project
Exactly.
ordinance.
But if we spend, just throw out a round number, we spend $1 million on salaries, that frees up $1 million of our.
That's correct.
That is
That's not
correct.
captured in that line.
Right.
That line, Jamie, is just showing the actual ARPA funds and that they're in their own restricted line. Have to use those for police salaries. That's how we report that to the federal government.
thank you, Aaron.
Where does it show that that then becomes?
That's what Jamie has in your other lines to bridge the gap.
You're 1.4. Yes, thank you, Aaron. When you go, I believe it's on page 5. So you use ARPA, that frees up other general fund money reserves. You then go to that one-time capital cost page, and that's where you could, does that make sense? That's where you freed up.
So this goes down to 5, because we're using it to.
Quarter, when we come to you, project ordinance amendment, you'll have one with the next. That is just reflecting the transfer that Jamie has done from this restricted line into the general fund to pay for those PD salaries. So that's the actual paper trail and how we report it to the federal government. They have to be designated by 2024. They have to be spent in total by 2026.
Out with this.
All of it.
Yeah, we'll spend it.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So the 1.4.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. You guys okay for the moment?
Well, I was gonna, let Steve know, somebody think, you got
PP3?
Yeah, why are we listing 887?
That was your balance in that capital project fund at the close of the fiscal year.
Money we put into the fund.
Right, right, sir. And then, got $42,000 from the Union County.
Largely, Stephen, as we were sitting here before the meeting, I'm in the last $10,000 of trying to get reimbursement. As far as I know, unless it's something at an agreement to close this thing out.
Okey-dokey. So we're gonna just slightly switch gears and talk about our internal decision-making process before we landed to you all with today's draft. So, each department director had an opportunity to come forward to Alex, Aaron, and me, and they presented their, notables, their operating budget, their capital requests, and talked about, you know, their assumptions and what's driving their bottom line. And so after those series of meetings that occurred in April, well, we are in April, we came together collectively to review the budget. And then at that point, the gap was, we had expenditures of 12 million, which is not far off, given where your amended budget is today. And then we had a gap of 2.4. So, so after that particular first glance, each department director went back and took a look at their operating budget, their capital requests. And I must commend the department directors here, for the record, because everybody worked collaboratively, everybody was willing to take another look at their budget, and be very forthright. And you know, this is an area where I could tweak, or this is a project I can phase. So that's an amazing thing, and I wanna throw that out there. And once the group came back for second round, we still were not balanced. We had 1.4, and that's the page that you see early in your document. And the list that Alex pulled together of one-offs, capital requests, like the police vehicles, a debt principal, what could we pay out of our reserves in order to get the budget balanced. So at this point, we've achieved a balanced budget, but I also think, you know, that the conversation ahead is gonna be useful for you. After today, you're gonna receive a series of presentations from the department directors, and then you go into your budget public hearing in June, and you move into adoption in late June. Yes, sir. I know what you're asking. Do we anticipate anything going into reserves? And if we do, it's very nominal. We haven't worked the math yet, but we can work it. Other thoughts, questions? I'm not sure if how you'd like to spend your time. We could, if you want to.
General government.
Let's talk about, let's talk about page 5.
Okay.
Fiscal video efficient structure. That's the 1.4. Some we've committed to, some them things that, places I'd like to get that sewer study done,
capital expenditures that we pushed off into the future just because it was so expensive. The idea would be to kind of get it redesigned, and then from there, subsequent years, do that. Yep, I mean, I just don't recall that conversation. Very well been the case, but forgive me, I just don't recall that.
let's, as we get into their individual presentations, that list, you know, I put some things. Sidewalk policy, is this the year to do that?
Those again there, please.
Mine were, sewer study, sidewalk policy, I see this as a,
So for this year, we would carry on, this next coming year, for the budget we're creating, we would carry on with what we've done in the past, which is taking the money we get from the state, $450,000 approximately.
That Piper's gonna come and sing for us.
Current year, what we did is when we were redoing our methodology, for lack of a better word, it took a year to do it, so we didn't effectively do our resurfacing program for the bulk of a year. We still got money in it, so we put it in reserve and we saved it up. We were able to combine that with the existing years. We were able to take the money from reserves and cover this year's current resurfacing. board said at the time was, okay, we'll do it and we'll make a decision on how to find. Cross that bridge when we get there. Work done so far?
Yeah, we have not yet started, but they expect to do, they're gonna start out in Stallings Park on May 15th, hopefully May 8th. Correct, yeah.
It's not like it's gonna be a special appropriation. Right, because it's beyond, I get it, you know, it was. It's because of the apartment complex, everybody routed from the neighborhood for 2 years. That's all right.
It's pretty good. You have your actual residents patching. You feel like a pothole.
Hey, honorable Schwarzenegger.
We did have a Stallings resident out patching.
Jamie, the fact of as an option.
I can get that to you, so.
1.4 is in the ballpark that.
Yeah.
Option. But if it's at 3%, and that money is taking 5%, we're making 2%.
Or rate of return more.
Heavily restricted in what we can invest in. What we probably all put in with our own retirement accounts. Typically on average over time, what we're allowed to invest in.
Or at least one. There are fives out there.
Risky, you're tying up money.
Yeah, but
We're talking about cash.
that's,
Yeah, in her defense, I, again, it's really complicated.
absolutely. So, Brad, I have been researching from other municipalities how they do that. And, Jamie and I can bring you more detailed information later in this budget season. But effectively, it would not be in effect for this fiscal year, even if we did do it. And what we're seeing, what I'm seeing from the research is that very few who do it as a pure enterprise fund, meaning it pays for itself. Most are doing, I mean, I call it a nominal fee, anywhere from $5 to $20 per resident. And most are charging that, at least the ones that I've been able to get to respond to me, through a utility bill, which obviously we don't have. Some do it through tax bills. The town of Weddington is starting that process, and they're going to have it on their tax bill. It's not very much, but they have told me that it's been challenging to start, just because of the semantics that you have to go through in the accounting. So we can bring you more information, but it would not be for this coming fiscal year. It would be able to be in effect that quickly.
The attractive part, of course, was having
Basically, I think anything where you can make the argument. I think.
Ready, you got a second? We got another.
Evening, everybody. Hey, real quick, before I get into the issue with Lily, I just want to give the council an update. As you sure you all know, we've had Stallings, Hemby Bridge, Indian Trail have had about 7 armed robberies over the last few months. Today, we made an arrest. Stallings PD detectives arrested somebody that's responsible for 5 of them. So we're still working on 2 other, well, one's ours, one's the sheriff's office, but bad guy was taken into custody this afternoon. So, kinda not. There is a connection, but he doesn't have a current address here. So, but is familiar with this area. So they're still in the middle of interviewing him. So, what's that?
Mugshot soon.
Yep. As soon as that's up, we're gonna do a press release on Facebook so everybody knows. So, any other thank you. I'll pass that on. Any other questions on that before I know we're on a time crunch here. These were, for ours that were cleared was 7-Eleven, the gate station, and actually what kicked it off was they tried to rob the gate, 7-Eleven again this afternoon. So, yeah. Yep. Again. So. Yes, sir. But anyway, to Canine Lily, I'm sure most of you know, Lily's been here for a little over 5 years. She's 6 years, just had her 6th birthday the other day. Josh Smith, Detective Smith, her handler, noticed she was having some nosebleeds, Took her to the vet. He said, oh, she must have something lodged up one of her nostrils. It'll work itself out. She kept having nosebleeds. It didn't work itself out. He took her in. They said, well, we're going to do a surgical procedure. We'll go in and we'll remove it. Before they did that, they did a CT scan, and it showed that she had stage 4 nasal chondrosarcoma after they did a biopsy on that. So Lily is terminal. She's got, if no treatment, she's got about 6 months. She's still working, can still work. If she were to get a treatment, it'll extend her life from 6 to 12 to 18 months. So obviously to Detective Smith, she's his partner and loves her like one of his own kids, he says. Alex and I talked about this, and we look at this. It's hard to not look at it from a pet perspective. We have to look at it from a business perspective too. It's gonna be about $7,000 to do the treatment to extend her life 6 to 12 more months. Our insurance, and having talked with Karen, we have insurance for in line of duty injuries or like the surgical procedure. They thought she had something up her nose. We have to pay deductible. When it comes to cancer treatment, we don't have insurance for that. So Josh has asked if he could set up a GoFundMe page to try to raise some money. I mean, everybody in the PD's already said they'd donate, and other canine handlers said they would donate. But before he did that, obviously Alex and I spoke, and we felt it's best that, we talk to you all and let you guys render a decision or at least have a discussion about it. So they said it will create some it will help enhance her quality of life, but potentially could still work. We just don't know. It's only impacting one side of her nasal system, wherever her, smell senses are. But as the tumor grows, it could push on her brain. It could push into the other side of her nose. We just don't know. Our plan is for her to keep working as long as she can work. Matter of fact, last week before the surgery, she got 30 pounds of marijuana on one of her stops. I mean, she's still a good dog. She's still the Lily everybody's seen.
What do you do with that 30 pounds?
That we don't, because that was in Mecklenburg County at the airport. So yeah. So yeah, it's just one of those. It's a tough conversation that Alex and I've struggled having this conversation. You balance it out. We're using taxpayer funds to extend her life, but we know she's terminal, or we don't. And people say, why are you not taking care of not just your pet, your part of your canine team, but it's a tough place to be. So we thought we'd try to, get some input from the council.
No, because then what if they
Up to 6,
raise
match up to 7,000.
10,000? We don't want to match.
I'll be honest, Josh thinks that this will raise a lot, so. Absolutely, yes, sir. Alex and I had that exact conversation, and
So this wouldn't be the town.
I think you can put a number you're shooting for, but it can exceed that. I've seen ones where they. Okay,
Like as soon as you reach it,
turn it off.
stop it.
is something I wanna ask after. This is, are we
So that is one of the things for Luna, July 1, we're going to purchase, for simple terms, I call it an AFLAC policy, like a pet care policy that would supplement what's not covered through our insurance with the league. And then and then we do have I guess, Karen, help me out for better lack of terms, a life insurance policy on Lily. So there's a death benefit that comes. I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but being practical, we have to look at those things. Is that accurate, Karen? Okay.
Okay, I didn't mean to distract it.
If it doesn't.
That's all publicized.
Okay.
Obviously, that's not something public.
We'll make sure to shut it off if it hits the number.
Can I ask a limited timeline?
He's got to talk to the vet. Yes, sir. I mean, yeah, that's one of the things we talked about last week was, so we'll get started with the vet and see what their timeline is to start.
Well, no, I'm talking about like, I mean, for all practical purposes, we are.
Right.
So we would start that process sooner than later for.
We're actually, yeah, we've already started talking about what that's going to look like. And, obviously Josh Smith is a great canine handler. He's doing a great job. He's got to decide whether he wants to put that investment, not just of time and energy, but of heart back into a new partner and go through there. But he's a great handler, and I'd love to have him continue on. So, and if not, then we'd have to select a new one. So.
Obviously, that's a four question.
He wouldn't leave. He wouldn't leave. He would, no, but he would say, Lily passes, he says, I just don't know if I'm ready for another dog or want another dog, or I'm ready to try something different in my career. So we'd identify another person internally to be a new canine handler. So, yeah.
Currently going to the airport, right?
He goes to the airport 2 or 3 days a week and then works investigations the
And
rest
are
of the time.
we seeing?
So we actually just got a deposit. I think it was a January deposit, and I can't remember. It was $11,000. I think since I last came to council to talk about the canine program, we're still sitting. He's been involved in a little over $1 million in cash seizures. So those are working their way through the forfeiture process through the courts. So that money will starts to trickle in anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So, I mean, those have been in the last year, so we should start seeing asset forfeiture money coming in soon.
But is any of that money? I'm basically just trying to understand, like, should we be potentially thinking that?
I guess if I'm understanding that right, we have Jamie, if you probably know that better than I do, so.
$400,000 budgeted revenue. Treasury, Jamie, keep me on this carefully.
Yes, Treasury and Department of Justice.
Budget for $5,000.
That's
On
correct.
page 10. Asset forfeiture funds of that.
Thank you all.